Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so glad you're here today because we're diving into something that is absolutely fascinating, but honestly, it's a little bit unsettling. We're going to explore the architecture of your mind and specifically how it reconstructs the past. We all trust our memories, right? We rely on them to tell us who we are and what we've actually experienced. But what if the very foundation of your personal history is, well, kind of just a fabrication?
Seriously, think about it for a second. Have you ever vividly remembered something that never actually happened? Like, think about a time you were completely 100% certain about a memory. Maybe you explicitly remember hitting send on an important text message, or maybe you remember a conversation with a friend playing out in a very specific way. But then later, you look at your phone or you talk to that friend, and you realize you completely imagined it. You didn't just forget. Your brain literally created a vivid alternative reality. All right, let's jump straight into part one, the myth of perfect memory. So we need to bust a massive myth right off the bat. Most of us carry around this assumption that our memory works like a smartphone camera. You hit record, life happens, and when you want to remember it, you just press play. But the scientific reality is vastly different. Memory is actually reconstructive. Your brain isn't pulling up a saved video file. It's actively rebuilding that memory from scratch every single time you recall it. And because it's actively rebuilding, the simple act of recalling a memory can actually change it. Which brings us to this highly counterintuitive truth. High confidence absolutely does not equal perfect accuracy. You can feel undeniably sure about a memory that is entirely false. Why? Because the brain activates the exact same neural systems for both real memories and false ones. So that vivid feeling of reality, as super convincing as it is, simply does not guarantee that the event actually happened the way you think it did. So how does this actually work? That brings us to section 2, how we reconstruct memories. To figure out where the bugs are in this system, we gotta look at the assembly line itself. There are 3 basic steps here. First up is encoding, where we actually take the information in. Next is storage, where we save it. And finally, retrieval, when we pull it back up. The real kicker here is that errors, distortions, and alterations can sneak in at literally any of these steps. You might not encode the info correctly because you were distracted, the storage might degrade, or during retrieval, your brain might just accidentally pull in unrelated details. You can kind of think of it like a strict division of labor in your brain. You've got the hippocampus, which is heavily involved in the actual formation of the memory, and then you have the prefrontal cortex, which basically acts as your internal fact checker, evaluating the accuracy of that memory. False memories usually happen when there is a breakdown in communication right here. The prefrontal cortex basically fails to catch the logical errors or the made-up details that the hippocampus just generated. Okay, moving on to section 3, the causes of distortion. Now that we know memory is a reconstruction, what exactly is causing these distortions to happen? There are 4 main culprits that warp our recall. First is just the reconstruction process itself. Your brain hates incomplete stories, so it relies heavily on assumptions to fill in the blanks. Second, we have suggestion and influence from other people. Third is the misinformation effect. And finally, imagination inflation, which is when repeatedly imagining something completely blurs the line between reality and fantasy. Let's actually zero in on a couple of these. If we're talking about suggestion, we absolutely have to talk about the famous psychological researcher Elizabeth Loftus. She essentially proved that you can implant entirely false memories right into someone's mind. In her legendary Lost in the Mall experiment, she gave participants these short stories about their childhoods, supposedly from their family members. But one of the stories, about getting lost in a shopping mall, was a complete fabrication. And get this. A huge chunk of the participants not only remembered this fake event, but they actually started inventing their own vivid sensory details to go with it. Wild, right? And the craziest part is how incredibly subtle the suggestion can be. You don't need a whole fabricated story. Changing literally one single word in a leading question can drastically alter a person's recall. Loftus found that asking, "Did you see the broken glass?" strongly implies that there definitely was glass. Because of that one word, way more people falsely remembered seeing it, compared to when they were just asked, "Did you see any broken glass?" Then we have the misinformation effect. This shows how seamlessly your brain stitches together an actual, original memory with completely new, totally false information introduced after the fact. Like, say you witness a car accident, and a few days later someone casually mentions the car was speeding. Even if it wasn't, your brain might just absorb that new info and weave it right into the original memory. The next time you recall it, you will genuinely remember that car flying down the road. We also really have to factor in the role of emotion here. People usually assume that if an event is highly emotional, like a really fearful or stressful situation, that the memory must be burned perfectly into their brain. But honestly, it's the opposite. While emotional memories feel incredibly vivid to us, high stress and fear can actually heavily distort the details as they're being encoded. You might remember the terror perfectly, but you completely misremember the color of a person's shirt or the exact timeline of what happened. So what happens when this goes wide? Let's hit section 4, when we all misremember.
Let's scale this whole concept up for a second. We've been talking about how individual memory fails, but what happens when social influence makes large groups of people share the exact same false memory? We call this the Mandela Effect. It's this absolutely fascinating psychological quirk where society collectively agrees on a memory that simply isn't real. It just proves how profoundly social influence and shared cultural touchstones can hijack our own personal memory systems. In fact, I guarantee you hold some of these false memories right now without even realizing it. Think about famous movie scenes. Everyone remembers Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father," right? Actually, scratch that. He never says it. He says, "No, I am your father." Or what about the Monopoly man? You'd swear he wears a monocle. He doesn't. No monocle. These everyday examples completely prove that massive groups of people can invent identical, entirely false details out of thin air. Okay, finally, section 5. Why the brain does this. So, seeing how easily manipulated and heavily distorted our memory is, we have to look at the biological why behind it all. It's the ultimate question, isn't it? If having an accurate memory is so absolutely crucial to our survival and our lives, why on earth did the human brain evolve to reconstruct instead of just recording? Why build a system that is so prone to bugs? Well, here is the big secret. Your brain actually prioritizes storytelling over accuracy. It craves meaning and needs efficiency, and it desperately wants a complete narrative. Saving every tiny sensory detail of every single moment would just take way too much energy. It's much, much more efficient to store the core gist of an event and let your brain autofill the rest later so that the world makes coherent sense to us. What this really means is that false memories are not a sign of a broken brain. They are actually a supernormal, necessary byproduct of a very healthy cognitive system. The exact same neural pathways that allow you to creatively imagine the future, engage in flexible thinking, and quickly complete patterns. Those are the very same pathways that sometimes fill in the blanks of your past incorrectly. It's literally a feature, not a bug. And the reason this matters so much to you is because our memories are the building blocks of our lives. They shape our personal identity, they lock in our core beliefs, they govern our emotions, and they guide our relationships. This messy, reconstructed, perfectly imperfect system is the exact thing that builds the person you consider yourself to be. Which leaves us with this final thought for today's explainer. If our memories form the very foundation of our identity, and as we've just seen, those memories are inherently malleable, prone to suggestion, and constantly shifting, well, who are you, really? It is a wild, wild thought to realize your past is just a living, breathing story that your brain is constantly rewriting. I really hope this sparked your curiosity to explore the incredible depths of your own mind. Thanks for hanging out with me on The Explainer today, and remember to always keep questioning what you think you know.